I'm joined today by the self proclaimed head of moonshot research here at Southbank Investment Research. Sam Volkering, you seem to be claiming in your latest find that it will outperform your recommendation of Nvidia, which you tipped way back in 2013. Now, before we get into what that new recommendation is, I would like to find out more about Nvidia in 2013 and what you expected at the time.
Yeah, sure. I should probably point out it's not. I mean, it kind of is self-proclaimed head of moonshot research, but also at the same time, I have forced our publishers to now refer to me that, and that is my official title, because since I started with Southbank Research, I mean that's what I look for. That's what we do is we look for moonshot tech that's going to change the fabric of society and how the world works. I was writing about that today in AI Collision about how I think Meta is about to have or is in the midst of their own iPhone moment. But we can get onto that at another point. Yeah, you mentioned Nvidia in 2013. So I guess this is again a perfect example of a moonshot idea, which don't always come off, I should add. But when they do, it's flat knacker bonkers as to what can happen because Nvidia in 2013, I guess my experience with Nvidia, actually, I should probably preface that with my experience with Nvidia goes all the way back into the 90s. Because I was a kid that was born in the 80s, grew up in the 80s and 90s, and gaming was everything. PC gaming, home consoles, that was the explosion of home gaming through the console wars with everything going back to the Commodore 64 to the NES and the Super Nintendo and Sega Mega Drive and the evolution of Dreamcast and into the N64s and then obviously PlayStation, Xbox, all those sorts of things. It's ingrained in the very fabric of who I am. Believe it or not, as hard as that may be for some people to believe, but PC gaming as well. All these things that I grew up with actually had a pretty foundational part of how I view the world and technology. And so my experience with NVIDIA goes back to when they were developing their early GPUs for personal computing for PCs. Because me and a mate, we used to play PC games all the time. That was literally, we'd go around to each other's house just to play PC games. And NVIDIA made GPUs. They made the chips that made these games come to life. And the better your GPU, the better the game was. And back then, there were sort of two main competitors in the GPU space for PC gaming, and that was ATI and NVIDIA. ATI eventually was bought out by AMD. And so this is where you find today's head-to-head in the GPU market with AMD and NVIDIA, which actually goes all the way back to the 90s. So I say that because when it came to working at the time with our Australian affiliate, which was then Port Phillip Publishing, they're now called Fat Tail Media, as you're well aware, we were looking at, what are the big ideas back in 2013 that were going to change the world in the next 10 to 20 years. And one of those things was neural networks, artificial intelligence. And it had been something that had been around for a long time and that was, not really well understood by the general public and the mass market. But in technology and tech circles was an evolving and emerging thing. And the key aspect of a future of AI, augmented and virtual reality, a truly immersive digital world, it's a bit like a PC. For all of that stuff to exist and to be real, you need really powerful computers to do that. You need a graphics engine that brings the digital world to life. And so for me, that's just an evolution of PC gaming. That's taking the world within a PC in a game into your physical world. And that's where NVIDIA was streets ahead of everything else. And that's where it made a lot of sense to, you kind of connect the dots and go, well, if that's coming and they're doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way through to Z in automotive, in gaming, they were doing still a lot in terms of servers, and developing a lot of stuff, starting to develop stuff around neural networks with Google at the time as well. it just made sense that this was the kind of company that was going to be an absolute, foundation of our digital future. And so we tipped it in December 2013. When I think after stock splits, I think the adjusted price was like 35 cents. I think at the time it was like $15, but they've gone through some stock splits since then. So I think adjusted it was about 35 cents. I mean, even after then today, what's the stock price? $110, something like that. So it's one of the most outstanding companies that's ever existed. But its story begins really in the 90s. And that's why I like these kinds of companies. And we'll get on to the next company that we're going to talk about in a minute. But I like these stories about these companies where they appear like they're overnight successes, but in reality, they've been decades in the making.
And suddenly the stock market wakes up to the potential, which is what you're predicting will happen for a stock that's in some ways extremely similar, right? In some ways, it couldn't be more different. But it is a very similar story, at least. You call it the linchpin of $1 trillion AI boom, pretty similar to the Nvidia story. I guess that was almost a linchpin in of itself, too. You claim this is a British firm that's going to be doing this, and it's going to be able to hold the biggest tech firms in the world to ransom. So take us through what the story is there. You can't give everything away, obviously, but take us through the broader story.
Yeah, so again, I can't tell you, the viewers today, the name of the stock. That is something we have to keep for our subscribers. And look, to be honest, the more I talk about this, I'm sure people will be able to piece things together and figure out the company that I'm referring to anyway. But we've done a deep dive in it in the same way that I did a deep dive on Nvidia back in 2013 to help step out and explain for people why this has such huge potential on the future of our world, on the future of technology. And so with this company, again, it's one of these stories where it's still relatively unknown. People don't know a load about it, much the same as they didn't know a load about Nvidia back in 2013. At least the mass market and the sort of the wider market didn't know that much. And their origins actually do span going back into the 70s, actually, and the 80s and the 90s. And really, they took a turn higher and started to build their business in sort of, I guess, a more significant way into the 2000s off the explosion of smartphones in the late 2000s and the connectivity of the internet through mobile and smart devices. I say they hold big tech to ransom is because a lot of what big tech is currently doing, a lot of the chips and a lot of the hardware that AI is based on, that big tech is developing to build and expand and grow AI, is based on this company's work. So in a nutshell, without this particular company and their expertise and what they do, a lot of the connected world we have today, smartphones, smart devices, automotive, and of course the explosion of AI, a lot of that I don't think it exists. And maybe it does, but certainly not at the level and quality that it is today. So they are really the core of what big tech is built on today. And they already have deals in place with the likes of Apple, with the likes of Nvidia, Microsoft, where these companies are already paying them millions every day for their expertise and technology. So for me, as the progression of AI continues into the future, and this is not something that's going away, we're talking decades and decades of progression that's coming. This British company, it is built, created, founded. Its headquarters are still in Cambridge. It is the linchpin of the rollout of AI because it is their expertise and their technology that pretty much all of the high-tech AI chips that are coming to market today is built on. And I think it's the best British company in the world, bar none. It's not quite the biggest by market cap yet. I think um, AstraZeneca is the biggest, but I expect this to be Britain's first $1 trillion company, and I expect it to continue on a pathway like Nvidia had done over the last 10, 15 years. I expect this company to take a similar trajectory forward.
It feels like another one of those, don't go gold mining, sell the shovels and the picks to the gold miner story, but once further removed. So the Nvidia was like, selling the chips to the AI companies. Now you're going once further removed. And we've been talking for years now on how best to harness the AI boom. Is this your best opportunity right now to harness AI?
Look, I think there's a multitude of ways to do it. And the thing about the way in which our AI world is being built is that there is no one company that does all of it. Even Nvidia, Nvidia doesn't have the AI chips it does without this company and a couple of others to ensure that their AI servers work the way they should. They can't they can't build those chips without copper. They can't build them without liquid cooling, but they also can't build them without this particular company's expertise either. So there are many parts to the puzzle, but for me, I think that this British company is the bedrock of it all. Particularly as we start to see AI bleed out into consumer devices, be it smartphones, laptops. To give an example, like I've got a pretty new MacBook that I'm doing this video on right now. It's got Apple Silicon in it. It's got the Apple M series silicon in it, which is supposed to be, Apple's best silicon hardware. And as Gemini gets integrated into my Chrome browser, as I go to Copilot to help, with bits and pieces, as I'm generating AI images, all these sorts of things, it's drawing on more and more power. And so my relatively new MacBook actually continues to struggle seemingly week in, week out with a lot of the requests because AI draws on so much power. And so that unless the chips get better, the memory gets better, and all these pieces get better, the AI world that's coming doesn't exist. And that's why, companies like this British company that we're talking about are so important because AI is absolutely going to be all around us. It's already starting to be, and that's only going to continue to grow.
I watched your presentation about all of this, and one of the things that stuck out to me was the story about how politicians have tried to sink their teeth into this company and what's going to happen to it. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Because you didn't provide the full details in the presentation, but I was really curious, especially given what's going on in the UK political system right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, they kind of had their chance at this. They, politics. They talk a good game about growth and identifying growth. They had a chance to get their teeth somewhat into this company, and then it was listed in the UK, and then it was delisted in the UK, and then it was bought by another company, and then it was sold by, and then attempted to be bought by another company, and then ended up being listed again, but in America because the capital in the UK wasn't there, which is a reflection again on British politics and the British market. So it's quite a storied history, but fundamentally, this is a company that was founded in Britain, built and grew in Britain to companies and customers all over the world, and is now a bedrock of the global rollout of AI. I mean, it is a very British story when you understand who the company is and what they do. And I don't think it gets the recognition in Britain for its impact on the world that we live in today. I think it's one of the great untold stories of British innovation, technology, and success, frankly.
And another interesting part of that is the fact that all these things seem to happen in Cambridge all the time. You call it the Silicon Fen in the presentation you give. There's this history of Isaac Newton and discovery of DNA and all sorts of other things, specifically in this particular part of Cambridge that you highlight. What is it about Cambridge and the Silicon Fen that seems to deliver these sorts of innovations and huge stories, time and time again?
I mean, look, there's different names for the area, and people call it the Golden Triangle as well, between Cambridge, Oxford, and London. A lot of biotech happens there, a lot of research, a lot of development happens there. It's clearly based around the universities, and their reputation for attracting talent fostering growing talent, so the right minds. And if you exist where the smart minds are, you can't help but be successful, I think, especially when it comes to technology. And yeah, Newton at Trinity College, this company's, a couple of miles down the road. You could literally jump on a bike and ride there in 10 minutes. It's when you have, and it's like Silicon Valley, when you have all of these atoms in the one place banging together, eventually you are going to get an explosion of some sorts. And I think that's sort of the case for why that area in particular is an area that should be focused on more and more, more capital, more support and assistance in using that as an engine for growth in the UK is important, which again never really gets the attention it should.
I assumed you were going to say something about punting, but anyway, thanks very much for sharing what you could share so far in this video. If you'd like to watch Sam's presentation, everyone, there should be a link in the description below. He doesn't give away what company it is in the presentation either, but you can find out a whole lot more about this story, and there will be an opportunity to discover which company it is at the end of that presentation. So I encourage you to take a look. Sam, thanks very much for joining us, and everyone else at home watching, thanks very much.